Mr. Warner, aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 63, the nays are 31, and the motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, Judy W. Chang of Massachusetts to be a member.
Mr. President,
the Senator from Massachusetts.
on roll call vote 192, I voted aye. It was my intention to vote no. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to change my vote because it will not affect the outcome.
Without objection.
Mr. President, on roll call vote 193, I voted aye. It was my intention to vote no. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to change my vote because it will not affect the outcome.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, today I rise to speak on an issue that is incredibly personal and vital to millions of Americans: the protection of in vitro fertilization. IVF is a medical miracle that has brought the joy of parenthood to millions of families who might otherwise have never experienced it. I am a strong supporter of IVF. And I am incredibly grateful for the technology that has enabled parents, moms and dads desperate to bring into the world little boys and little girls, to finally hold a child in their arms. It is astounding to note that over 2% of all births in America, each and every year, come from IVF. That translates to millions of parents who've been given the chance to bring new life into the world. To date, more than 8 million babies have been born through IVF. However, recent developments have caused some confusion and concern among parents and among those who wish to be parents. The Alabama Supreme Court's decision to recognize embryos created through IVF as children under the law has left many prospective parents worried, understandably worried, about the future legality of IVF. Now, the Alabama legislature acted quickly to make clear that IVF is fully protected in the state of Alabama, but nonetheless, confusion persists. To the best of my knowledge, all 100 senators in this body support IVF. Seeing this confusion that unfortunately has been fueled by Democrat partisans, I reached out to Senator Katie Britt from Alabama. And I asked Senator Britt if she would join together in drafting legislation, federal legislation, that would be a clear, straightforward, ironclad protection for IVF. I believe we should put into federal law a clear and unambiguous protection to make clear that no state in the union can ban IVF, that no local government in this country can ban IVF. Senator Britt and I drafted this together. This bill is simple, it is straightforward, it is clear. IVF is profoundly pro-family. It is an avenue of hope for millions struggling with infertility. To every mom and every dad at home, and to every woman and man desperately hoping to be a parent, know that our bill will ensure that IVF remains 100% protected by law. And this should not just be a policy or a general affirmation. This should be a clear and unmistakable federal law. We invite our colleagues in the Senate from both sides of the aisle to join together in supporting this crucial legislation. This should be a measure that transcends political divides. A recent poll shows that 86% of Americans believe IVF should be legal and protected. This is an opportunity for us to put partisan divisions aside and to come together and unite on a shared commitment to protecting IVF. That's why in just a moment I'm going to ask unanimous consent to pass this legislation. But before I do so, I want to yield to the senator from Alabama, Senator Britt.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I was proud to join my colleague from Texas in introducing the IVF Protection Act. I am grateful for his leadership on this important topic. Look, as a mom, I know firsthand that there's no greater joy in this life than that of being a mother. IVF helps aspiring parents across our nation experience the miracle of life and start and grow a family. That's why I strongly support continued nationwide IVF access. IVF access is fundamentally pro-family. For the millions of Americans who face infertility every year, IVF provides the hope of a pathway to parenthood. We all have loved ones, whether they're family members or friends, who have become parents or grandparents through IVF. Across America, about 2% of babies born are born because of IVF. That's about 200 babies per day. So think about the magnitude of that number and the faces and the stories and the dreams it represents. In recent decades, millions of people have been born with the help of IVF. Along with my colleague, Senator Cruz, I was honored to lead Senate Republican colleagues in a joint statement emphasizing our shared support and continued nationwide access to IVF. IVF is legal and available in every single state across America. That includes my home state, where Governor Ivey and the Alabama legislature acted quickly and overwhelmingly earlier this year to protect IVF access for our state's families. Today, the Senate has an opportunity to act quickly and overwhelmingly to protect IVF access for our nation's families. That's what the IVF Protection Act would do. It's straightforward, just as Senator Cruz has said. The bill would give aspiring parents nationwide the certainty and peace of mind that IVF will remain legal and available in every single state. Now, I want to break this down as directly as possible. First, there is only one bill that would protect IVF access and not stray outside those parameters. That's our IVF Protection Act. There's only one bill that would protect IVF access while safeguarding religious liberties. That's our IVF Protection Act. And there's only one bill, protect IVF access, that could get 60 votes in the Senate, and once again, that's our IVF Protection Act. However, that's not the bill that Democrats are going to be putting on the floor this week. Sadly, they aren't interested in a bill to actually protect IVF access and figuring out how we could get that to become law. That wouldn't advance their true goal, which is about partisan electoral politics. If Democrats allowed the IVF Protection Act to pass today, they would lose a key scare tactic they believe helps them in November. And that, ultimately, is what this is all about. They're in week 2 of their summer of scare tactics, and eventually they're going to transition into a fall of fear-mongering. At the end of the day, the American people want secure borders, they want safe streets, they want stable prices, and they want strong families. My colleagues across the aisle know that they can't sell the Biden administration's record on any of these topics. It's been failure after failure yet again. So instead, they have to rely on distorting and misrepresenting Republicans' positions on issues, including our support for IVF access. The bottom line is the American people deserve better, and there is no better path out there than our bill, the path of common ground solutions, not show votes or scare tactics. Again, I want to applaud the leadership of my colleague from Texas. Senator Cruz has been a champion as we work to make sure that the world knows that we're going to protect access to IVF. While Democrats prioritize scaring families, Republicans will continue to fight. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, sometimes the folks at home can find what happens, the parliamentary procedure on this floor, confusing. So I want to explain what's about to happen. In just a moment, I'm going to ask unanimous consent to pass the IVF protection bill into law. One of two things will happen in response. One, the Democrats in this chamber can decide that IVF should be protected by federal law, in which case this bill will pass the Senate 100-0. The other thing that might happen is Senate Democrats will utter two words: I object. So I want you to listen very carefully to the Senate Democrats. And whatever else is included in the speech, understand, if the remarks end with the words, I object, then Senate Democrats will have made the cynical political decision that Democrats don't want IVF protected in federal law. They don't want to provide reassurance and comfort to millions of parents in America, because instead they want to spend millions of dollars running campaign ads suggesting the big bad Republicans want to take away IVF. I get why that could be good politics. But I hope Senate Democrats are not that cynical. Understand again, if you hear the words, I object, Senate Democrats are saying, no, we will not protect IVF in federal law because we want to play politics. Mr. President, as if in legislative session, and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Finance Committee be discharged from further consideration of S 4368, and that the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. I am not going to mince words here. It is ridiculous to claim that this bill protects IVF when it does nothing of the sort. In fact, it explicitly allows states to restrict IVF in all sorts of ways. It's literally in the bill text. Remember, it did not take state lawmakers in Alabama passing a ban on IVF for clinics in the state to suspend services. Under this bill, there are a million ways Republican-led states could enact burdensome and unnecessary requirements and create the kind of legal uncertainty and risk that would force clinics to once again close their doors. Also, even though it is an inherent part of the IVF process that families will make more embryos than they need, this bill does absolutely nothing, not a single thing, to ensure families who use IVF can have their clinics dispose of unused embryos without facing legal threats for a standard medical procedure. Instead, this bill completely ignores the matter of what happens to frozen embryos in order to appease Republicans' extreme anti-abortion allies. This was intentional, and it leaves the door open to a lot of chaos. So this Republican bill really is a PR tool, plain and simple. It's just another way for Republicans to pretend they are not the extremists that they keep proving they are. Meanwhile, there are bills some Republicans are pushing for right now that would enshrine as a matter of law that life begins at conception and that discarding unused embryos is essentially murder. Senator Cruz himself supported a personhood amendment to the U.S. Constitution. No way around that. The junior senator from Texas wanted to change the United States Constitution to give embryos the same rights as living, breathing human beings. Look, the stone-cold reality is that you cannot protect IVF and champion fetal personhood. So I'd like to ask my colleagues who are offering this enormously inadequate bill, and I hope they do answer directly, do you support letting parents have clinics dispose of unused embryos, which is a typical part of the IVF process? Or do you support fetal personhood, which by its very nature will throw IVF access into chaos? Because until they clearly answer that question, and it's a couple simple ones, all the claims of supporting IVF will fall obviously short, just like this bill does. That's why I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President.
The senator from Texas.
Mr. President, the senator from Washington suggested that this bill does not protect IVF. Let me read you the clear statutory language that unambiguously protects IVF. A state shall not prohibit in vitro fertilization as defined in Section 4B of the IVF Protection Act services, and shall ensure that no unit of local government in the state prohibits such services. That is clear, that is unambiguous, that is explicit, and that is ironclad. Had the Democrats not cynically said, "I object," that language would have just passed the United States Senate 100-0, a strong federal protection of IVF. Now, Democrats know that out of 50 states, not a single state is seeking to ban IVF. They know that the threat that they plan to spend millions of dollars trying to convince the voters is real, that no state is currently pursuing that. They know that Alabama, whose Supreme Court started this issue, the legislature promptly came into session and acted to make clear that IVF is protected. And the senator from Washington asked a question. I do find it interesting. She asked a question and wanted me to answer it, but she's no longer on the Senate floor to hear my answer to the question. But I'll answer it anyway. The senator from Washington suggests that those states that pursue personhood amendments, that is somehow inconsistent with IVF. The one problem she has is facts and reality, because there are 3 states, Alabama, Georgia, and Missouri, all of which have adopted personhood amendments, and all of which protect IVF. So IVF is legal in Alabama, it's legal in Georgia, it's legal in Missouri. So the Democrats maintain that IVF is in jeopardy, and yet the facts are precisely to the contrary. Understand why the Democrats just did what they did. Every Democrat on the ballot is going to tell the voters, if you don't vote for me, a Democrat, mean Republicans are going to come take away IVF. And I'll tell you, Mr. President, the reason they're going to say that is because the Democrats' record on abortion is extreme and out of the mainstream. Every Democrat senator in this body has voted for legislation that would legalize abortion literally up until the moment of birth, up to and including the 39th and 40th week of pregnancy. That is radical. Only 9% of Americans support the extreme policy position of Senate Democrats on abortion. 91% of Americans look at that and say, that goes too far. Even among those Americans who call themselves pro-choice, a majority of pro-choice Americans look at the position of the Democrats and they say, wow, abortion up until the moment of delivery in the 9th month of pregnancy, that is too much. So what is the Democrats' political strategy? Don't talk about their actual record on abortion. Instead, try to change the topic to last week, contraception, and this week, IVF. And they know that no state in the union is trying to ban contraception and that no state in the union is trying to ban IVF. Every single senator in this body supports the right to contraception. Every single senator in this body supports IVF being protected. But the Democrats are counting on a docile media to pick up their message and carry their message. They know that the bills we are voting on tomorrow will fail. That's not a bug, it's a feature. They want the bills tomorrow to fail. Why? Because this is all about running TV ads, claiming Republicans are opposed to IVF. They know it is false. And by the way, one of the reasons the bills will fail tomorrow is they deliberately trample on religious liberty. You know, there used to be a time when there was a bipartisan commitment to religious liberty, but no longer. The Democrats have decided that the First Amendment to the Constitution no longer matters. And so the Democrats' bill would, among other things, force a Catholic hospital to provide IVF procedures, even if it was contrary to the faith of Catholic doctors performing the procedure. Now, our bill does not seek to force anyone to do anything. We all have a right to live according to our faith, so if your faith teaches you not to use IVF as a doctor, you should have the right to say, I'm not going to participate in that. But understand, the Cruz legislation that the Democrats just cynically objected to would protect IVF for every parent in the country. And it would become federal law except for one thing. The Democrats do not want it to. Because if we pass clear, strong federal protections for IVF, the issue that they're planning to campaign on would go away. What we've just seen is one of the most cynical displays of partisan politics to ever occur on the Senate floor. It's designed deliberately to deceive the American voters. It's unfortunate that Democrats put politics above protecting parents and above protecting IVF. But just remember, the next time you hear a Democrat saying, and they're going to spend millions of dollars saying it, we're the ones who want to protect IVF, understand, we could have passed strong federal legislation today, but Senate Democrats don't want a protection of IVF. They want a campaign issue. I yield the floor.
Senator from Kansas.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And we thank you for the leadership of Senator from Texas and Alabama on this issue that's important to literally millions of Americans, as you talked about. But, first of all, let the record show that today the Democrats objected to a Republican-led IVF Protection Act. The Democrats objected to protecting IVF. This is personal to so many people up here. It's personal to many Republican senators. I would suppose a half a dozen of us so far have a family member, maybe a child or a grandchild because of IVF, staff thanks to IVF. Maybe it's as personal to me as anybody up here. For some 30 years of my life, I had the opportunity, the privilege of delivering a baby most every day. And certainly just nothing but fond memories of each one of those opportunities to give a baby to a new mom and dad and just see the smile on their faces and see their lives change forever. But not everybody was that fortunate. Not everybody is that fortunate. 10 to 15% of Americans have an infertility problem. 10 to 15% of married couples struggle to have children. And that's why I work so hard to have an infertility clinic, a place where people could come, travel hundreds of miles to get help with their infertility treatments. And certainly there were many basic things we could do, and we helped thousands of women and helped them have a baby. But if we weren't successful, the next step was in vitro fertilization. And personally, I'm proud that I participated in hundreds of IVF cycles, successful cycles, and delivered many, many, many babies from in vitro fertilization. The country needs to know that Republicans believe in IVF, that we support it. I've never heard one Republican senator up here say anything else. I've not heard any state trying to take this down. So I'm proud to stand up here today and support Senator Britt's and Senator Cruz's bill to protect in vitro fertilization. We're going to have an opportunity tomorrow on a show bill. We'll have a show vote on a show bill. Senator Duckworth's bill on IVF has poison pills that not many Republicans can tolerate. The first poison pill is it denies freedom of religion, as Senator Cruz talked about. Freedom of religion. The bill we'll be voting on tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned, is unconstitutional. That as a physician, a Christian physician, a God-fearing Christian. There are certain things that I will not participate in. But I happen to believe that in vitro fertilization is a gift from God, that God has given us this technology to do good with. And I want to make sure that we apply that. But there will be certain hospitals and physicians that don't want to participate in IVF. But the Democrats' bill tomorrow forces that physician in that hospital to participate against their conscience. I think that's a violation of religious freedom. The second poison pill in that legislation, the bill's definitions are too broad. They create an unlimited, unfettered right to all reproductive technologies. And you'd have to assume that that includes cloning and gene editing. Are we ready to go out there and force hospitals and doctors to participate in cloning and gene editing? I just don't think America's ready for that. And here's the third issue, the third poison pill that's being ignored, is this legislation by Senator Duckworth requires infertility clinics to go right to IVF, that they can skip all the other easier steps, if you will. And I won't bore the rest of the Senate with some of those easier things that we could do, but there are many things you can do for infertility before jumping to IVF. And I just don't think that that's good legislation to overregulate that patient-physician relationship. So it's a great honor to come here today. Every day, today, 200 babies were born from in vitro fertilization. 200. Let's celebrate those babies. We are the party of pro-family and pro-life. We support protecting in vitro fertilization. I ask this chamber to come together and celebrate the blessings of in vitro fertilization as opposed to mounting political disinformation campaigns that are disingenuous to the beliefs of so many in our conference. As I said before, the Republican Party stands as the pro-family party, and nothing embodies this more than welcoming a new baby into loving arms. Standing with these families means offering them encouragement and support in their journey towards safe and secure in vitro fertilization treatment. Our commitment to protecting life ensures that every family has the chance to experience that joy of parenthood through in vitro fertilization. Our priority is always to make it easier for families to have a baby, not harder. We must understand that there's over 8 million families now where IVF has answered their prayer. And that's why, again, I'm so honored to stand here beside Senators Cruz and Britt and champion this pro-family legislation and guarantee access to in vitro fertilization to all Americans. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. President,
Senator from Texas.
I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.